Afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with me, Bill Reimer, your not so reluctant prophet today. But I do have some thoughts and concerns about this growing anti-Semitism in the face of what can't be defended, namely Hamas's attack on Israel. The monster of intersectional identity politics is a poisoned dart aimed straight at the heart of Christian ethics and the plurality inherent to classical liberalism. If allowed, it will return us to all the horrific Nazi and communist social collectivist failures of the past as it reawakens our basest tribal instincts by pitting one identity group against another. Today they have come for the Jew, but tomorrow they will come for you. How did this come about? The West is dying because of the suicidal ideation of university professors who are teaching their students to hate themselves as an extension of the oppressive culture into which they were born. This, even though identity politics has invariably created totalitarian and authoritarian regimes. So obviously, the academics responsible do not care. After all, as learned academics, they must be aware that our culture, as compared to any other in the history of mankind, has created greater personal autonomy, economic liberty, plurality, and legal justice. But this too must be ignored for them to pursue their radical cultural revolution. What they don't realize is that in condemning our culture, Christianity, and the Western liberal values which have been responsible for creating democracy, plurality, and the economic prosperity of free markets, that they are replacing this with the critical dialectical insanity of neo-Marxism synthesized with Nazism. This is a perfect Hegelian combination here. If Marxism is the thesis and Nazism is the antithesis, this combination of the both is the synthesis. Marxism and Nazism are, after all, simply other Western ideologies, and ones which resulted in identity politics, murder, oppression, authoritarian tyranny, and economic ruin. In doing so, they deliberately ignored the fact that liberalism and their ideology both originated in the West, while conveniently omitting the history of how the latter invariably became death cults of murderous identity politics, where individuals are deemed to be morally superior or inferior, based purely upon their immutable characteristics. In fact, it bounced up further. Sorry, folks. In fact, in the face of the astounding rise in anti-Semitism in the West and its link to Nazism, some are now making comparisons to it and Hamas, particularly since Western governments have been very reluctant to condemn Hamas. My own prime minister admitted they were conflicted reluctant to condemn Hamas and its unwarranted, heinous perpetration of terror against innocents, which include its own women and children whom it hides behind. Nazism required faith to believe in it, since there was no evidence to justify its ideological conclusions. It created mystical simulacra to replace reality. Nazis believed that they were a part of an inevitable ontological process of the evolutionary development of the master race. It fulfilled all Nietzsche's ideations of the Übermensch, where man would become his own god. It invented its own sacred games, rituals, and festivals. It offered sacrifices to the pagan god of statism. It existed as a denial of Christianity, just as Islam does. Moreover, it blamed the Jews for problems of Germany's own making. There are some arguments made by historians and scholars about certain similarities between the ideologies of Nazism and some forms of radical Islamism, particularly in their expressions of extreme anti-Semitism and xenophobia. However, it's important to note that these comparisons are specific to certain radical interpretations of Islam, not the religion as a whole. During World War II, there were instances of political and military relationships between Nazi Germany and the leadership of the Arab world. These relationships were often founded on shared hostilities toward common enemies, such as the United Kingdom and the French Third Republic, along with communism and Zionism. Nazi Germany made significant attempts to promote an alliance with the Muslim world against their alleged common enemies. Subtitle: Universities have become one of the main sources of anti-Semitism. I provide a link to an article. You can read it for yourself, but I'll read shortly from it. Making this caveat before I read from it, it's important to clarify that not all professors are anti-Semitic. After all, universities are supposed to be diverse places with faculty members holding a wide range of beliefs and ideologies. But do they invariably do so? Sadly, there have been concerns raised about instances of anti-Semitism in academic settings. The title of the article I'm reading from, the link of which I provided, Educators Warn of Anti-Semitic Outbreak on College Campuses, denounced tone deafness of faculty and students. Educators and Jewish leaders are sounding an alarm on an outbreak of anti-Semitism on college campuses and are speaking out against faculty and students who displayed a complete lack of empathy following the Hamas terrorist attack against Israel. The Anti-Defamation League, or ADL, which has been tracking instances of anti-Semitism in the U.S. since 1979, reported over 100 anti-Semitic instances in the United States since October the 7th. The organization also said it received a sharp increase in complaints from college campuses during a conflict between Israel and Palestinian forces in May 2021 and again this month. Speaking with Fox News Digital, Touro College and University System President Dr. Ellen Kedish said Jewish students on college campuses over the past decade have felt an increase in anti-Semitism, but up until this point it felt perhaps that it was manageable. Tim Scott wants to defund colleges over anti-Israeli statement. Hit them where it hurts, he says. Kedish went on to say, I think the most recent outbreak has shattered that illusion. Kedish said of the Hamas terrorist attack against Israeli citizens. That's the end of that, from that article. In my summating thoughts, some students suggest that faculty members who endorse certain political movements, such as the boycott, divestment, sanctions BDS movement against Israel, may contribute to an environment where anti-Semitic incidences occur. There have been reports of Jewish students experience vandalism and threats of violence, and educators and Jewish leaders have expressed concern about a perceived outbreak of anti-Semitism on college campuses. Under neo-Marxism, Nazism, and political Islamism, there is no room for dissent and diversity of opinion. And so now too in our universities, under the moniker of their postmodern woke agenda, many in the academy have created a ridiculous simulacrum, a fantasy, namely that Israel and Zionism are the boogeyman and not the unconscionable totalitarianism of Hamas. These worldly professors may claim to be atheists, but if what they believe in practice ain't an idolatrous religion which is altogether too close to Nazism, then I have no idea what could possibly be considered such. You're going to serve somebody. Choose carefully. These are things to think and pray about on this October the 25th as we ponder why on earth Anti-Semitism has once again become an issue. We will never put these things to bed until we put these radical leftist mind worms to bed. God bless you. Have a lovely afternoon.